What's up, everyone? It's Doug the Dog Guy, and I am here with the one and only Kim Ottone Tank. She is a hiring expert for the pet sitting and dog walking industry. Thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Oh, sure. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, for anyone that's been living under a rock, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm Kim Tank, and I live in California. My service area is the San Francisco East Bay area, and I've been operating for 33 years. I also live 2 hours away in a little town called Pollock Pines, and we have a few clients up there, and we're starting to develop that area, but primarily in the San Francisco Bay Area.
That's incredible. 33 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So you've seen the whole industry really evolve.
Yes, I have. It's, of course, it's like the old, we had to walk 5 miles to school in the snow both ways and all that. But we didn't have cell phones when we first started. I got my first
Wow.
cell phone 3 years into it. Very few people had them at that time. We certainly didn't have software to run our businesses. And all of that has just been life-changing for pet sitters. I look back and I don't know what we did before when we were out and couldn't be reached in an instant like we can now. So.
I can't even imagine trying to run a pet sitting business without a cell phone. Wow.
I know. Fortunately, by the time I hired my first employee, we provided her with a cell phone because we needed to be able to reach her. And so that was a big difference from our first couple of years in business. Thank goodness. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and that leads us right into what I really wanted to talk to Kim about is she has always used employees. And this is something that is amazing, and something that I think we need to all get on the same page about as an industry. There's still too many people trying to use independent contractors. I myself made that mistake for the first few years in my business, and it was really you sharing so much of your knowledge and wisdom in the Pet Sitter and Dog Walker Facebook groups that started to open my eyes and open so many other people's eyes to, hey, this is not the right way to do it. We need to be using employees. So touch a little bit on why that's so important, and then we're going to get into how to pay your team. We're specifically going to talk about the difference between piecemeal pay and hourly pay, and why hourly pay is beneficial.
Okay, great. Well, one of the reasons I started off with employees is that I checked with the state of California back in the early 90s, and they were adamant that workers that work for you in the daily operations of your business are going to be employees. And this was long before the ABC test, which is one of the more strict tests now in usage, long before that came along. But it wasn't just about the legality. I learned as I went along that this was the way to really support my workers. I believe in supporting your workers with workers' comp, with unemployment insurance, all of these. You can call them benefits. They are sort of legal entitlements, I guess you would say. It's certainly in the state of California that's true. So I believe in having workers in the way that I can support them the best with the proper training methods, but also making sure that they're covered and insured in every way possible. So for me, that was the way I wanted to start off. And I'm glad I had that vision back when I first started, because I had no idea that I would be an employer for so many years and have as many people. Now, I've never been a large business. The most we've had at any one time is 9 people working for us. We're not huge, but we believe in quality, not quantity, and in the sense that I wanted to do things the right way rather than grow quickly and have to go back and redo things.
Yeah,
So
I love the quality over quantity. That is just so vital to everything that we do. And before we get into pay, can you quickly touch on that ABC test?
Sure. There are a number of different tests that various states use. About half of the states currently use some form of the ABC test. In its strictest form, it makes it so that in order for someone to be an independent contractor, they have to meet all 3 criteria. Unlike the common law test, where it's a preponderance of different criteria, that is used to determine if the overwhelming factors point to employee or contractor, but rather with the ABC test, they have to meet all of the criteria, each single one of them. So the A test involves the amount of control. All of the tests talk about control that you have over the worker. And that's kind of an interesting word, because control can mean a lot of different things, but it usually means if you're dictating how the work is done in any way, shape, or form, that's going to be control. So in order for someone to be an independent contractor, they would have to exercise control over their own work. The B prong states that in order to be an independent contractor, they have to do work outside the normal course of your day-to-day operation. So that's the sticking point, is the B prong, because if you have a pet sitting company, then what your workers are doing is pet sitting. Then anyone who does pet sitting is operating, they're doing the core work of your business. They're going to be considered an employee in an ABC state. And then the C prong just states that they have to have their own independent business, which some people would say, well, that's easy. I can just have them go out and get a business license. But it really does, depending on which state you're in. Sometimes they go back and they look, did this person actually, were they in business before they came to you, or did you retroactively put them into business to fill the criteria? So, like I said, the C prong talks about having an independent, already established business. And so very few pet sitters can meet the criteria to be an independent contractor if you're using the ABC test. It's just really not possible.
Yeah, I've never seen it done correctly with independent contractors. Have you ever seen it done correctly?
I've had some people come to me and say, well, we do a different thing with licensees, and they're like franchisees and that sort of thing, and they've had it drawn up by an attorney. And honestly, I suppose, but that's not really what other people are doing. Those are the exceptions. And honestly, I don't want to operate a business where I have to have hands off and that I sold licenses to my people. I want to have a team and a staff that I create and I have control over. So I honestly cannot think of anyone that I know that would truly fit the criteria.
Right.
There could be someone out there, but it's going to be state dependent. In California, we simply are not able to use independent contractors at all.
Right.
It's not possible.
Right. I mean, California is one of the strictest places in the country for any kind of employment law. And I mean, I'm in Florida, which is pretty lax. And even the Florida's Department of Labor told me that I was misusing my independent contractors, that they were supposed to be employees. So if I'm being told that in Florida, I mean, that tells you a lot right there.
Yeah. And I think I see the industry moving towards employees. The PSI has had their state of the industry surveys, and previously it was much more prevalent for people to use ICs, but each year the percentage of ICs has gone down and the percentage of employees have gone up. And nowadays, I think it's pretty common when you see a discussion forum, more people are piping up and saying, you reconsider the contractor uses. This is probably what you want to do, is go with employees. And of course, I'm behind that 100%. I don't know why I'm so passionate about it. Because I know I run my business properly. Why do I care about what? Well, I hate to see people get in trouble, and I hate to see workers be at a disadvantage because they're not classified properly. There are a lot of disadvantages to a misclassified worker.
Right, right. And that's what's so inspiring about you. You know, I see your posts and your comments and all of the different Facebook groups, and you're just out there trying to help and trying to educate people, and because you want what's best for the entire industry as a whole.
I do. I think it brings up our level of professionalism if we are legally and professionally having our teams set up. It brings up the whole industry. When you have an employee, you are essentially responsible for everything they do. And with the contractor model, I think there's always that thing, well, you can pawn it off on it's their fault. And then the contractors say, no, it's the hiring company's fault. And you're working with two different companies, essentially. And I think as professionals, just to cover our clients and to be a one-stop shop for the responsibility. And that's one of the key ways to do that.
Right, right. And as a consumer, you know, I wouldn't want to work with a business that didn't have that level of oversight.
Absolutely. I tell people, well, when I'm searching for a company, if I have a choice between a company that contracts out the work versus one that has actual employees, I will pick the one with employees. That says something to me about their integrity and their hiring practices that I may filter into other areas of how they perform work for the company. So that's my choice.
Right. Now, and most states use the ABC test, right?
About half of them right now. Some of them only use the A and C prong, which I think it's the B prong that's really important. But a good chunk, many states are starting to use the ABC test, and I think it's becoming more and more of them. But in the other states, you know, there's a little more leeway, but it so much depends on the person who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're not in an ABC state, but you talked to somebody in the Department of Labor in Florida, and they told you
Right.
how they felt about it. And there's been a joke for a long time. It kind of depends on the mood. If you get audited, the mood of the auditor on that day. And I have to say, yes, you could pass an audit 1 month, and 6 months later have somebody who was upset about something that day, and
Yep.
nope.
That is so true. That's
I
so
do.
true.
And why take a chance? If you have employees, you're never going to fail a misclassification audit, because the state is never going to tell you, nah, you should be using contractors instead. They're simply not going to, because yes, they get their taxes from ICs, but it's the withholding methods with employees, it's so much cleaner, it's automatic. There isn't a lot of, there's no fudging on how much the payroll taxes are going to be more promptly paid, and chances are more accurately paid. So the states want us to do that.
Right, right. What do you say to people that say, oh, I could never afford to have employees?
Well, I say that most of them are probably spending more on their contractors than I am on my employees. If you're paying 60% or more to your contractor, you could probably save money by using employees. I believe contractors, in my mind, I believe contractors, where legal, should be paid more, because they have a higher tax burden, they have more responsibility, they have less coverage, they don't have unemployment insurance, so they have more risk in their life. They should be paid more because they are their own business. And what's funny is, it comes up every once in a while, well, how can I find someone who's really good and doesn't want to charge me 100%? Well, that is a flaw with the contractor model. If someone's really a contractor and has their own clients already, they're going to want darn close to the whole amount, because that's what they know they can get with their own clients that they must be allowed to service. You certainly can't have a non-compete with a contractor. They are their own business. So I believe they should be paid more. My employees have a whole different, it's a whole different work ethic. They're not out trying to run a business. They show up when they're told to show up. They have days off. They can call in sick and know that I will get the work covered. It's a whole different attitude, and for that, they're willing to accept their hourly rate. I think we have to get away from the business owner's mindset. A lot of business people say, well, I want to make $30 on a visit, so anybody I hire is going to want to make $30 on a visit.
Right.
Well, we have all the overhead, we have all the responsibility, we have all of the admin work to do. There are a lot of people that just want a job, and they don't necessarily demand $30 an hour or $30 a half an hour. They want a job.
Right.
And they want to be trained. They don't want to work 7 days a week. They want to be able to take a vacation and not have to email 500 people telling them I'm out of town that week. So it's a job. It's different. There are a lot of people that just want the simplicity of having a job, and they're willing to accept less than the full rate for that.
Right.
At McDonald's, they don't get the whole rate for the hamburgers they're selling, because that would be ridiculous.
Right.
Well, much in the same way,
Yeah.
McDonald's has to make a profit, has to pay all that overhead. Well, we have that same issue as well.
Yeah, and I would argue that that's most people's mindset that are looking for a job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're not expecting to make the whole thing, and there are a lot of perks that go along with being an employee of a pet sitting service, and I think until you've hired, you don't really. It may not be in your mindset to think that way. But I have such wonderful staff, and they never come to me and say, "Gee, Kim, why can't I make all the money?" It's just it's just not how it works with being an employee. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a good way for us to transition into how you pay your team.
Okay, I'm a big fan of the hourly model, and so when I first started out, I paid by percentage. I didn't really know what else to do, and then I switched to a flat rate when I saw the flaws in dealing with the percentage model. I decided that a flat rate would be better. Well, about 4 years ago, I switched over to hourly, and it was something that I feel I should have done a lot, many, many years ago, just for a number of reasons. The first reason of all, I really feel that it's most fair to my workers. But I think the number one reason is that it's easier to follow all the labor laws.
Mm-hmm.
Labor laws are generally based on hours. In California, we are so unique in so many ways. Our workers go into overtime after 8 hours in a day, not just 40 hours in a week.
Wow.
So if we don't track the hours, do we know if we owe them overtime? I just did payroll yesterday, and I had somebody had 3/4 of an hour of overtime. Somebody else had 2 hours of overtime. It's a small
Wow.
amount, but in order to be legal, I don't just blow that off and, oh, well, we just pretend that didn't happen. No, they have to be paid that. I have to account for that. So if I don't know how many hours they're working, so I'm tracking hours anyway, is my point. I'm tracking hours anyway, and for the purposes of all that. Also in California, they earn 1 hour of sick time for every 30 hours worked, whether they're part-time, full-time, or whatever. And when I used to pay by the visit, I sort of guessed at it, but now I don't have to guess at all. It's very clean. I submit hours to my payroll company. They track how many sick time hours they have available. So I think following the labor laws, and in California, we are supposed to know when our workers have worked. I can say, well, I know they worked 8 hours that day, but I have never had them come to me and audit my payroll records, but they could say, no, we need to know if it was 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock or whatever it was. So that's one important reason. It also makes sure that minimum wage is always met. Now, a lot of people go, well, I pay well above minimum wage for a visit, so why would I need to be concerned about that? Well, one day my sitter called me and had done a visit, and then it took her, there was a traffic accident on the only road to get to the next stop. It was 40 minutes for her waiting in the car.
Wow.
That should have been less than 10-minute drive. And so, yes, she racked up an extra half an hour that I wasn't making any money. She wasn't doing anything productive, but she was working because she was between visits. And she got paid for that time. And had I paid her by the visit, I may have gone under minimum wage.
Right.
So it's critical to know that they are being paid for everything they do. I do count from the first visit or task. I say that because if I have them, we have many people on lockboxes, but some are still on keys, so we do keep a locker for store and supplies. If they stop at the locker first, that's where their time and their mileage starts. And then their last stop of the day is where it ends. And I say mileage because we pay an hourly rate plus we pay the federal rate per mileage. And all of that is that entire work time. We're calling the commute time that first trip of the day and the last trip home. And there could be some debate about that. But my understanding and the way I do things is that I consider that commute time.
Right.
So they're paid for everything they do. And let's just say they were out doing a visit and you had a cat that wasn't eating and you needed to stop at the grocery store to get tuna. Well, by virtue of the fact that my sitters are on the clock, going to the store is counted in the hours they worked. I don't have to sit and go, well, I'm paying by the visit. They stopped and got tuna. How much is that worth?
Right.
Okay, it's worth whatever fraction of an hour it took them. So for me, it's just automatically, I don't feel bad about that. The other day I had a sitter get locked out and I had to have another sitter go to the locker, get a spare set of keys and drive a 20-minute drive out to another town. It probably cost me paying her for an hour, but it's no problem because she's on the clock and to her, she's getting paid just as much as if she had been at a visit.
Right.
So it's fair to her. I don't have to sit and quantify the extra tasks.
Right.
So that is one major thing.
It really sounds like it just makes everything easier from the management side.
It does. People say, well, how do you do that? Well, you just keep track of their hours. It's fairly simple.
How do you keep track of everything?
Well, it's funny because we were doing a paper timesheet, but my brilliant sister who designed my database and now my app said, I think you need a timesheet app. Let me work on that. So now they put in their start time and their mileage, and when they can do it on a daily basis, they can go back a couple days later if they forgot to do it or whatever. But it essentially adds up all the hours for me and the mileage. So all I have to do is go in and look if there's any overtime or if there are any split shifts, because California moment, we have to pay extra if there is a split shift. In other words, if they're working AM and PM on the same day.
Wow.
If it's separated by more than like a standard lunch hour.
Wow.
Which is one reason when people say, well, how come there's more than one sitter on the job? Well, because it would cost me a lot more money to keep somebody in split shifts for days and days in a row, and I would have to pass that cost on to you. That's one reason. Plus, we like to keep their schedules clean. We work in a model where they tend to have big chunks of visits and big chunks of time off rather than a visit here and a visit there. It just makes more sense. And well, people say, well, what about the one-off visits if it's only one? Well, that's an issue with pay regardless of whether you're paying by the hour or by the visit. You still need to Well, that's going to be a state-specific thing. We do not actually have a minimum shift law in California, but I consider a minimum shift to be at least an hour. So if they're going out for one visit, technically the entire drive is commute time, but in that case, I pay them for a minimum of 1 hour, even for a 30-minute visit, because that's just not fair. So no matter how you pay, you need to make it fair for them to do the one-offs.
Right.
And whether you calculate that hourly or per visit virtually makes no difference. It's very easy to convert from per visit to hour if you know your times, if you know what your average visit, how long it takes, and your average drive time. You figure out how many visits you're doing by hour, and you do the math. I figured that I was doing 1.5 visits per hour, so I took what they made and added per visit and added 50% to come up with the hourly rate the first time I did it.
That's exactly how I do my math.
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
I probably learned it from you.
It's really not too difficult.
If you can make all this work in California, then anybody should be able to make it work anywhere.
It's odd that in some counties and cities in California, they have higher minimum wage. But oddly enough, in my county that I operate, Contra Costa County, which has some fairly affluent areas, we're still at the state minimum, which is $15.50.
Wow.
Now, I do start everybody at that for a lot. First of all, in the training, they're not generating any income for a while. We're spending a lot of time training. And then we bump them up after. But we also pay mileage, which adds up to quite a bit. Most of my sitters take home over $20 an hour by the time they have their mileage pay. And that mileage is all incorporated into what I factor for percentages when I pay. When I say 55% is my payroll cost, that's wages, mileage, and payroll taxes and workers' comp. It's all in a nice, neat little package. And
That's
like
great.
I said, if I can hold that at 55%, then I think it's reasonable to say that in most places you can go from the contractor model. If you're already only paying 50% and you're using contractors, my first thought is, well, how are you getting anybody to work for that? But if you are, then you're probably not going to save money. But it's time to look at your practices and go, maybe you want to bump up your employment practices a little bit, spend a little bit more, and it'll be worth it in the product that you get and how you feel about your company.
Right. Right. Yeah. My all-in labor costs, including taxes, mileage, and everything, comes in right at 57% on average.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, sometimes I'm a little bit higher. When you're paying by the hour, you're going to have variables. It's when you're paying by the visit, it's okay. This times this is always this, right? Sometimes things take a little bit longer, and it costs me more money. But on the flip side, I was just telling someone about this earlier. We have a visit where we only put out trash cans for a client. She used to have a dog. The dog passed away. She's disabled, and she needs help with her trash cans. Now, we do not charge her our full rate, but we charge about 2/3 of what we charge for a regular visit, and it takes a good 2 minutes, which costs me in labor for one of my minimum wage around 50 cents, and I'm charging $20. So there's a case where Kim wins. Okay, sometimes I lose. Things take longer. It costs me more money. My percentages creep up higher. Sometimes it's 60 on times where that happens. But on the flip side, I've got my garbage visit where I'm, and it's kind of nice that I'm not shelling out $10 for that.
Right.
And really, they're often in the neighborhood anyway. So it's the miles to drive to the house, if any, and the 2 minutes it takes.
Yeah.
So it all balances out, I think, is my point. It
Yeah.
does. It balances out. And it's fair to the workers. They know, hey, I worked 60 hours as paid check. They know how much they're going to get.
Right.
And they're going to get 60 hours worth of pay. Because in this type of business, things go wrong. They end up 10 extra minutes at a house or 15. I don't have to feel guilty because I automatically, by virtue of paying on the clock, have paid them. And another thing I want to bring up is that the question of, well, what happens if you have visits out of the area, or they're in one end of the territory and you really need them to do a visit at the other end? Well, it's automatically covered. It takes them longer to drive out there. They're getting paid for their drive time. It's more miles on their car. They're getting a bigger mileage reimbursement. And in case there's any confusion to anyone, drive time and mileage reimbursement are absolutely not the same thing.
Right.
One is you're paying for their time, and one is you're reimbursing them for the cost to operate their vehicle.
Right.
Driving time is, except for the commute, is work time until, you can beam me up, Scotty, to the next visit. Okay. When travel is required, there's virtually no way to get to the next visit unless it's next door without either driving or riding a bike or whatever the method is. So it is every bit work time as doing a visit.
Right.
It is. It's required. They do not have the use of their personal time. They can't do anything else with that time that it takes to get from A to B.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And that's something I see a lot of confusion on in some of the Facebook groups.
Yeah. Well, they say, well, do I pay drive time or mileage? Well, probably ought to do both because, and again, I'm going to mention this. With mileage reimbursement, people will say, well, I'm not in a state where you have to reimburse mileage. Okay, that's fine, but very few people know that you must pay at least minimum wage plus the cost to drive the car anyway. So if you're paying minimum wage, you really need to be reimbursing for mileage, or you need to bump up their pay. Because if by the time they've driven their car all day, it caused them to dip below minimum wage, then you have just not complied with the labor laws. Now, they could say, well, I'll just pay them more. Well, it's really better pay mileage because a reimbursement is not taxable, nor does it go, for me, it doesn't go into my workers' comp cost.
Right.
So if I have $30,000 that I've paid in mileage through the year, that lowers my business gross that workers' comp charges me on. So that's, yes, I've just saved 3% of $30,000 because they're not considering that wages. Workers' comp is based on wages.
Yep.
So there's just all kinds of little things that you can tweak it to things can come out to the positive. And another thing is, one of my employees, when we were talking about the price of gas, it goes up and down, and I'm only paying I consider the federal rate to be a pretty good reimbursement at 65.5 cents. I like to do that because it maximizes the non-taxable wages I can pay them. But one of my sitters once pointed out, well, if you have a car that gets 30 miles to the gallon and you're reimbursing 65.5 cents, I'm not going to even do the math, but I know that's close to $20 a gallon. Think about it.
Wow.
They're getting 65 cents a mile at times 30. So every time they use a gallon of gas, they're getting $20, even in California.
Wow.
That will cover at least 3 gallons of gas.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I think it's a great deal. I think they definitely have money left over from that. So again, I feel like even though there's wear and tear on their car besides gas, like I said, that more than covers it. And it gives me a way to pay them in non-taxable dollars. And everybody wins with that.
Oh, man.
Love that?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great, Kim. Tell us where we can find out more about you and where people can get in touch with you.
Okay. Well, on Facebook, I'm Kim Ottone Tank, and the middle part is Ottone. The last name is Tank, like fish tank. I have a cat named Fish. So, and I have an email address for my coaching is kim@staffingstrings.net. My business is Apron Strings, and so that's staffing.
Nice.
And .com. I'm sorry. Staffingstrings.com.
Perfect. Okay.
I think I said net.
Yeah, I will put that info on the screen right now, and then I will put the links down in the description below. And I mean, as you guys just heard, Kim is an expert on this. I have learned so much from her over the years. She's always in all of the Facebook groups, the Pet Sitter Facebook groups, sharing her wisdom. You also have a Facebook page for Staffing Strings.
I do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
So everybody get in touch with her. If you have questions about this, if you're struggling with figuring out whether to use ICs or employees, how to pay them, how to do the transition, Kim is the woman to talk to, guys. I mean, you got to check her out. So
thank you.
Thank
You're
you
too
so
kind.
much. Thank you so much for taking the time, though. We're here at the Pet Sitter World Conference in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and lots of stuff going on right now. So I just super appreciate you taking a few minutes for us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And I'm Doug the Dog Guy, reminding you to stay positive.